Well, first of all, everybody knows that Joe Biden has selected Kamala Harris, senator from California, as his vice presidential running mate. And although many are pleased about the symbolic move that represents, we should remember two things. That in a poll a few months ago, a majority of African Americans preferred Elizabeth Warren over other black female potential candidates. Why? Well, because as black authors of an op-ed in the Washington Post a few weeks ago, she has actually walked the walk, not just talked the talk. She has fought corporations who are exploiting African Americans in a whole variety of ways: safety, health, insurance, and of course, economically. She's worked in the housing area. She's worked in the consumer credit and debit area. She's gone after payday loan rackets and rent to own rackets. That's number one. Number two, if you look at Kamala Harris's record, especially as Attorney General of California, she registers as a corporate Democrat. She's taken large contributions from Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, campaign contributions. When she was Attorney General, which is an office in California with a big staff and a lot of power, she didn't move against Silicon Valley on privacy issues, and she certainly didn't move on antitrust issues, allowing a lot of mergers to go through, especially Facebook acquisitions. And she was particularly egregious in dropping a case on a bank called One Bank in California that has exploited tenants mercilessly, driven people to foreclosures mercilessly, and it got into trouble. And it was called One West Bank, and it just happened to be run by Steve Mnuchin, who is the President Treasury Secretary toady for Donald Trump. And in 2013, a memo from her own top prosecutors in Kamala Harris's Attorney General office wanted to move against One West. They said, quote, "It rushed delinquent homeowners out of their homes by violating notice and waiting period statutes, illegally backdating key documents, and effectively gamed foreclosure auctions," end quote. Pretty bad stuff on a big scale. And she dropped the case. She didn't move against One West. And 3-4 years later, guess who contributed to her Senate campaign? Steve Mnuchin. Now, a lot of this is all going to come out, and it's not going to be particularly edifying of Senator Harris. But on her behalf, I can say that she's very much like corporate Joe Biden. So Donald Trump and his horrific travesties and atrocities and disgusting pro-corporate behavior, bungling of COVID-19, lying as a daily practice on matters of significance, makes any Democrat candidate look good. But once he's displaced by a Biden-Harris administration, look for the huge and growing progressive wing of the Democratic Party to become very aggressively critical, because the choice of Harris instead of Warren, in effect, closed the door, which was already closing, on Bernie Sanders and his mass movement of progressive Democrats. Closed the door. Basically, Bernie Sanders is just left with a few planks, and not the most important ones, like single payer, at the Democratic convention.
You didn't really think that the masters of the universe were going to allow Elizabeth Warren to be in line for the presidency, did you?
Hope springs eternal, because there was one pragmatic reason for Biden's people to do that, which is she would hold on to more of Bernie's voters. And I think Kamala Harris, when all this pro-corporate stuff and non-prosecuting corporations, and how she defied a U.S. Supreme Court order to reduce the congestion in prisons in California. The prisons were packed with prisoners, twice the number that the prisons were built for, and she defied that. I think when more and more people realize that she wasn't all that good on criminal justice, whether it's street crime or corporate crime, they may stay home and just not vote. So I thought there was a glimmer of hope there, Steve, that pragmatic approach would work. African Americans were going to vote for Biden anyway. They showed it in the primary, and they're certainly not going to vote for Trump. So I thought, and others thought, that Elizabeth Warren, in addition to her record, her experience, her courage, her taking on the Wall Street control of America in so many ways, corporate welfare, corporate crime, etc., that they would give her an opportunity, but it wasn't to pass. And now they've closed out Bernie. And so they not just closed out Elizabeth Warren, they've closed out Bernie. And that's a big segment of the Democratic vote.
David?
Ralph, when Biden was picking his vice president, if he had to choose between Warren and Kamala and was told that you could win with Elizabeth Warren, but Kamala is more guardian of the status quo, he'll go with the guardian over the status quo over the person who will help him win?
Especially when he's ahead 10 to 12 points in the polls and it may be widening. I think he was very close in the polls. He might have reconsidered the situation because she's not going to bring California into the fold. California's Democratic big time. They're going to vote for Biden. So there wasn't much to argue for her compared to Elizabeth Warren in terms of the Bernie voters.
But so many people vote by what they think is it's like they're selecting the next host of the Tonight Show. And so they're looking at identity. They're looking at they're checking off, the easy boxes because it's more of a casting call than people really understanding what they stand for.
Well, you're right. That's true. And also likability. And Kamala Harris presents very well. She has a good facade. She is articulate. But when you look at the record, which is what all voters should look at, it gives great pause. We just put up on our website a memorable statement from Martin Luther King Jr. at the great rally in Washington, D.C. in 1963, the historic I Have a Dream speech. And he said, quote, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," unquote.